The sun had already stolen every drop of moisture from her cracked lips when Serena Caldwell realized she would die out here in the New Mexico Territory desert, another nameless grave in a land that swallowed dreams whole. Her legs moved mechanically beneath her torn skirt, one foot dragging in front of the other through sand that burned even through the worn leather of her boots. She had lost count of the days since the stagecoach accident. 3, 4. Time blurred in the relentless heat that shimmered off the desert floor in waves that made the horizon dance and lie. The other passengers had scattered in panic when the wheel broke and the coach tumbled down the ravine. She had called out for help until her voice gave out, but the screams had faded into the vastness, and she found herself utterly alone. The canteen had been empty since yesterday, or was it the day before? Serena could not remember. Her thoughts moved sluggishly through her mind like honey in winter. She thought of her sister's farm in Red River, the green of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The promise of a new life after Boston had become unbearable. Her fiancé there had married another woman 2 weeks before their wedding, leaving Serena with nothing but shame and the need to disappear. Her sister Martha had written about the beauty of New Mexico, about fresh starts and wide open spaces. Serena had never imagined those wide open spaces could become a tomb. She stumbled over a rock she had not seen and fell hard to her knees. The impact sent shock waves through her dehydrated body, but she barely felt it anymore. Everything had become distant and dreamlike. She tried to push herself up, but her arms trembled and gave out. The sand pressed against her cheek, hot enough to burn, but she could not find the strength to lift her head. This is how it ends, she thought with surprising calm. 22 years old and dying in the desert, unmourned and undiscovered. Then she heard the sound of hoofbeats. At first she thought it was a hallucination, another cruel trick of her failing mind. But the sound grew louder, more insistent, accompanied by the jingle of spurs and the creak of leather. She tried to lift her head to call out, but her throat produced only a rasping whisper. The horse stopped somewhere above her. She heard the thud of boots hitting the ground, then strong hands rolled her gently onto her back. Through the haze of sun and exhaustion, she saw a face lean over her, blocking out the merciless sky. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face weathered by sun and wind but young, maybe late 20s. Concern etched lines around his mouth. "Jesus," he breathed. His voice was rough but kind. "How long have you been out here?" She tried to answer but could not form words. Her tongue felt thick and useless in her mouth. The cowboy did not wait for a response. He slid one arm beneath her shoulders and the other under her knees, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Her head lolled against his chest, and she felt the steady beat of his heart through the fabric of his shirt. He smelled of leather and sweat and horse, and it was the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced because it meant she was not alone anymore. He carried her across the sand with long, purposeful strides. Through her half-closed eyes, she saw him heading toward an outcropping of rocks that cast blessed shadows across the desert floor. He set her down gently in the shade, propping her against the cool stone. "Stay with me now," he said, his voice urgent. "I know you are hurting, but you need to stay awake." He moved quickly, efficiently, pulling a canteen from his belt. He uncapped it and brought it to her lips, but when she tried to gulp the water desperately, he pulled it back. "Slow," he commanded. "Too much too fast will make you sick. Just small sips." He was right, of course, though every cell in her body screamed for more. He let her take another small sip, then another, rationing the precious liquid with the wisdom of someone who understood this harsh land. Between sips, he dampened a cloth and wiped it across her forehead, her cheeks, her neck. The cool water on her burning skin felt like salvation. "What is your name?" he asked, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "Serena," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Serena Caldwell." "I am Caleb Quinn," he said. "You are safe now, I promise you that." She believed him. Perhaps it was delirium, or perhaps it was something in his eyes that spoke of absolute certainty, but she believed him completely. "The stagecoach," she whispered. "It crashed. I walked, trying to find help." His jaw tightened. "When?" "Days ago. I do not know how many." He gave her another careful sip of water, and she could see him calculating distances and survival in his head. "You should not have lasted this long in this heat without water. You are stronger than you look." "Does not feel like it," she said, and to her surprise he smiled. It transformed his serious face entirely, revealing warmth beneath the weathered exterior. "Any woman who can walk through this desert for days and still make jokes has more strength than most men I know," he said. He sat back on his heels, studying her with professional concern. "Can you move your legs, your arms?" she tried and winced. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. "Yes." "Good. My ranch is about 6 miles from here. I was checking fence lines when I saw buzzards circling. Came to investigate and found you instead." He paused, his expression darkening. "Those birds were waiting for you to stop moving." A shudder ran through her that had nothing to do with the cold of the stone at her back. 6 miles. She never would have made it. "Thank you," she said, and tears she thought her body had no moisture left to produce slid down her cheeks. "Thank you for finding me." Caleb reached out and gently brushed the tears away with his thumb, a gesture so tender it made her heart catch. "No need for thanks. This desert is cruel enough without leaving people to die in it." He let her rest for 20 minutes in the shade, giving her water in small increments while he kept watch over her. She studied him when she thought he was not looking. He wore the practical clothes of a working rancher: dark trousers and a shirt faded from many washings, a leather vest, and a wide-brimmed hat that he had tossed aside. His hands were calloused and strong, the hands of a man who worked hard for his living. There was a quiet competence about him that made her feel safe for the first time since the accident. "Can you ride?" he asked finally. Serena tried to stand and swayed dangerously. Caleb caught her immediately, his arm strong around her waist. "I will take that as a no," he said. "All right then. Plan has changed." Before she could ask what he meant, he swept her up into his arms again. He carried her to his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that watched them with calm eyes, and somehow managed to mount while still holding her. He settled her in front of him, her body cradled against his chest, one of his arms secure around her waist. "Hold on," he murmured against her ear, and she did, her hands gripping his forearm as he nudged the horse into a gentle walk. The ride passed in a blur of heat and exhaustion. Serena drifted in and out of consciousness, always aware of the steady presence of the man behind her, the security of his arm keeping her safe. She felt the rhythm of the horse beneath them, heard Caleb speaking softly to the animal, encouraging it onward. When she opened her eyes again, the landscape had changed. The brutal open desert had given way to scrubby grassland, and in the distance she could see buildings. As they drew closer, she made out a ranch house built of adobe and wood, a barn, corrals, and several outbuildings. It was modest but well-maintained, the kind of place built by someone who took pride in their work. "Almost there," Caleb said, and she felt his chest rumble with the words. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, older, with gray in his beard and a weathered face that had seen many hard years. His eyes widened when he saw Serena in Caleb's arms. "Good Lord, boy, what did you find?" "Stage accident survivor," Caleb said shortly. "Thomas, I need you to ride into Red River. Fetch Doc Morrison if you can find him. If not, get Maria Rodriguez. Tell her we need help." Thomas was already moving toward the corral where several horses stood. "How bad?" "Exposure, dehydration. She has been in the desert for days." Thomas swore softly and moved faster. Within minutes, he was mounted and riding hard toward the road that presumably led to town. Caleb dismounted carefully, bringing Serena down with him. He carried her into the house, kicking the door open with his boot. Inside, the rooms were simple but clean, with whitewashed walls and practical furniture. He took her to a bedroom and laid her gently on the bed. "I am going to get you some proper water and food," he said. "Do not try to get up. You are safe here." She nodded, too exhausted to do anything but comply. Her eyes drifted closed and she heard him moving around the house, the sound of water being poured, the clatter of dishes. When he returned, he had a pitcher of water, a cup, and a bowl of what looked like broth. He sat on the edge of the bed and helped her sit up enough to drink. The water tasted like heaven, cool and pure. He would not let her drink too much at once, still carefully rationing despite the abundance now available. "The broth, too," he said. "Your stomach needs something gentle." It was thin chicken broth with a little salt, nothing fancy, but it was the most delicious thing Serena had ever tasted. Her body seemed to wake up with each spoonful, recognizing nourishment after days of deprivation. "Where were you headed?" Caleb asked as he fed her, his movements patient and careful. "Red River," she said between sips. "My sister Martha lives there with her husband. They have a farm on the north side of town." His eyebrows rose. "Martha Brennan, you know her." "Everyone knows everyone in Red River," he said with a slight smile. "It is not exactly a big city. Martha is a good woman. She must be worried sick about you." Tears threatened again. She had not thought about what her sister must be going through, believing Serena dead or lost. The stage was supposed to arrive 5 days ago. "Then Thomas will make sure she knows you are alive when he gets to town." Caleb set the bowl aside and gently pushed her back down against the pillows. "Right now, you need to rest. Your body has been through hell." She wanted to argue, to insist on cleaning up or at least getting out of her filthy, torn clothes, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes closed of their own accord, and she felt Caleb pull a light blanket over her. "Sleep," he said softly. "I will be right outside if you need anything." She wanted to thank him again, to say something about the kindness of a stranger who had saved her life, but sleep pulled her under before she could form the words. When Serena woke, the light coming through the window had changed to the golden amber of late afternoon. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was or how she had gotten there. Then memory flooded back, along with an assessment of her body. She still ached everywhere, and her skin felt tight and burned, but the desperate, dying thirst was gone. She heard voices from another room, low and concerned. One was definitely Caleb, and the other was a woman speaking rapid Spanish mixed with English. "She is very lucky you found her when you did," the woman was saying. "Another few hours and we would be having a very different conversation." "I know," Caleb said, and there was something in his voice that made Serena's heart skip. "When I first saw her lying there in the sand, I thought I was too late. But you were not. You brought her back, and now she will recover. The human body is remarkably resilient, especially when it is young and strong." Footsteps approached the bedroom, and Serena quickly closed her eyes, suddenly feeling shy about being caught listening. The door opened quietly. "Still sleeping," Caleb murmured. "Good. Sleep is the best medicine for what she has been through." The woman, who must be Maria Rodriguez, came closer. Serena felt gentle, capable hands check her pulse at her wrist, touch her forehead. "Her fever has broken and her heartbeat is stronger. Keep giving her water and light food. Tomorrow she can try something more substantial, and keep her out of the sun for at least a week." Her skin needs time to heal." "I will," Caleb promised. They left the room, and Serena heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of a horse departing. She opened her eyes and stared at the ceiling, processing everything. She was alive because a cowboy named Caleb Quinn had been checking his fence lines at exactly the right moment. The randomness of it was staggering. If he had been an hour later, or had gone in a different direction, or had ignored the buzzards, she would be dead. The bedroom door opened again, and Caleb looked in. When he saw her eyes open, he smiled. "You are awake. How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by a herd of cattle," she admitted, and he laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "I imagined so." He came into the room and sat in the chair he had apparently pulled up beside the bed. "Maria says you are going to be fine, but you need to take it easy for a while." "I heard," Serena admitted. "I was awake when you were talking." "Eavesdropping on your rescuer," he teased gently. "That does not seem very grateful." "I am grateful," she said seriously, meeting his eyes. "More grateful than I can possibly express. You saved my life, Caleb." The humor faded from his face, replaced by something intense and searching. "Anyone would have done the same." "Not everyone would have taken such care," she said. "You could have just given me water and pointed me toward town. But you brought me to your home, called for help, stayed with me. That is more than just basic decency. That is genuine kindness." He looked uncomfortable with the praise, shifting in his chair. "I lost someone to this desert once," he said quietly. "My younger brother. He was 17, thought he knew better than everyone else. Went out riding without enough water, got thrown from his horse. By the time we found him, it was too late." He met her eyes, and she saw old pain there. "I swore then that I would never leave anyone to die out there if I could help it." Serena reached out without thinking and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "I am so sorry." "It was 5 years ago," he said. "The pain has dulled, but the lesson stayed sharp. This land demands respect, and it does not forgive carelessness." They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, a connection forming between them that went beyond gratitude or circumstance. Serena felt it like a physical thing, a thread pulling tight between her heart and his. A commotion outside broke the moment. Caleb stood and went to the window, and a smile broke across his face. "Your sister is here." Before Serena could respond, she heard the front door burst open and rapid footsteps. Then Martha was in the doorway, her face streaked with tears, her hands pressed to her mouth. "Serena," she breathed, and then she was across the room, pulling Serena into her arms with a strength that suggested she never wanted to let go. "Oh God, Serena, we thought you were dead. When the stage did not arrive, they sent out a search party and found the wreckage. No survivors, they said. No one anywhere near it. We all thought." "I am sorry," Serena whispered, holding her sister tight. "I am so sorry. I just kept walking. I thought if I could just reach town." "You walked for days through the desert," Martha said, pulling back to look at her sister's face, tears streaming down her own. "Days, Serena. Do you understand how impossible that is? How miraculous?" "She is stronger than she looks," Caleb said from where he stood by the window, giving the sisters space. "And stubborn too, I think." Martha turned to him, and her expression transformed into something fierce and grateful. "Mr. Quinn, Thomas told me what you did, how you found her and brought her here. I do not have words to thank you enough." "No thanks necessary," Caleb said, but Martha was already crossing to him, taking his hands in hers. "You saved my sister's life. That is a debt I can never repay, but I will spend the rest of my life trying. If you ever need anything at all, you come to me and James. Do you understand?" Caleb looked embarrassed but touched. "Your sister is a fighter. She saved herself by lasting as long as she did. I just happened to be in the right place." Martha's husband James appeared in the doorway, a tall man with kind eyes and a farmer's build. "We should let Miss Caldwell rest. Maria said she needs time to recover." "You will come stay with us, of course," Martha said, turning back to Serena. "As soon as you are well enough to travel, we will bring you to the farm." But Serena found herself looking at Caleb, not her sister, and something in her chest tightened at the thought of leaving. "Maybe in a few days," she heard herself say. "I should not travel until I am stronger." "She should stay here at least another day or two," Caleb said quickly. "Just to make sure she is truly stable. The ride to your farm, even in a wagon, might be too much right now." Was it her imagination, or did he look as reluctant to see her go as she felt about leaving? Martha looked between them and something knowing flickered in her eyes. Of course, whatever is best for Serena's recovery. She bent and kissed her sister's forehead. "I will come back tomorrow to check on you. James and I will bring some of your things, proper clothes and such." After the Brennans left, Caleb brought Serena more broth and water. He helped her sit up to eat, and she was mortified to realize how weak she still was. Her arms trembled from the simple effort of holding the cup. "It will take time," Caleb said gently, seeing her frustration. "You put your body through an ordeal. You cannot expect to bounce back immediately." "I hate being helpless," she admitted. "You are the furthest thing from helpless I have ever seen," he said. "Helpless women do not walk for days through the desert. Helpless women give up and die. You fought for every breath, every step. That is not helpless, that is heroic." She felt her cheeks warm and not from fever. "I do not feel heroic, I feel like a burden." "You are not a burden." He said it with such conviction that she had to believe him. "You are someone who needed help, and I am glad I could give it." Over the next 2 days, Serena grew steadily stronger. Caleb was a patient caretaker, bringing her meals, helping her to the washroom when she needed it, changing the bandages Maria had put on her sunburned shoulders. He was unfailingly respectful, never presuming or overstepping, but there was a growing warmth between them that neither could deny. On the second evening, she was strong enough to sit up in bed without help, and Caleb brought their dinner into the bedroom so they could eat together. He told her about his ranch, how he had built it up from nothing over the past 6 years, working as a hand on other spreads until he had saved enough to buy his own land. "It is not much yet," he said, "but it is mine. 160 acres, mostly grazing land. I have about 50 head of cattle right now, enough to make a living if the market holds." "It sounds like hard work," Serena said. "It is, but it is honest work, and I answer to no one but myself." He paused, studying her face. "What about you? What brought you all the way from Boston to New Mexico?" She hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. "I was engaged to be married. A man I thought I loved, thought I knew. 2 weeks before our wedding, I discovered he had been courting another woman behind my back. Someone with more money, better family connections. He married her instead, and I became the subject of pitying looks and whispered gossip." She took a breath. "Martha wrote to me about Red River, about how it was a place where people could start over. So I packed everything I owned and bought a ticket west." "His loss," Caleb said simply. "Any man stupid enough to choose money over you does not deserve you." The certainty in his voice made her heart race. "You barely know me. I know you are brave. I know you are strong. I know you do not give up even when most people would." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I know that in 2 days, you have made this house feel more like a home than it has in all the years I have lived here." "Caleb," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. He stood abruptly. "I should let you rest. Maria said not to tire you out." But before he could leave, Serena reached out and caught his hand. "Stay, please. Talk to me a little longer." He sat back down and they talked long into the night. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her parents who had died when she was 19, about the bookshop where she had worked. He told her about learning to cowboy from his father, about the grief of losing his brother, about the loneliness of building a life alone in this harsh but beautiful land. By the time she finally fell asleep, the moon was high in the sky, and Caleb was still sitting beside her bed, holding her hand. The next morning, Martha and James arrived with a wagon full of Serena's belongings, including proper dresses and her few precious books. "You look much better," Martha said, relief evident in her voice. "The color has come back to your cheeks." "I feel almost human again," Serena said. She was sitting in a chair in the main room, dressed in a borrowed shirt of Caleb's that hung comically large on her frame. "Though I am looking forward to wearing something that actually fits me." Martha helped her change into one of her own dresses, a simple blue cotton that had survived the journey. As Martha buttoned up the back, she said quietly, "He seems like a good man." "Who?" "Do not play coy with me, Serena Caldwell. Mr. Quinn. The way he looks at you, the way you look at him. I know that look. That is the way James looked at me when we first met." Serena felt her cheeks burn. "I have only known him 3 days." "Sometimes 3 days is enough," Martha said. "Especially when those 3 days include him saving your life and taking care of you. That creates a bond. He is just being kind. Kindness does not make a man's eyes light up the way his do when you walk into a room." Martha squeezed her shoulder. "I am not saying you need to marry him tomorrow. I am just saying, pay attention to what your heart is telling you. You came out here for a fresh start. Maybe this is part of it." When they returned to the main room, Caleb and James were talking about cattle prices and fence repairs, but Caleb's eyes immediately found Serena, and the warmth in them made her breath catch. "The dress fits you better than my shirt did," he said with a small smile. "Though I must admit your shirt was very comfortable." James cleared his throat. "We should probably be getting back. The animals need tending." He looked at Serena. "You are welcome at the farm whenever you are ready, but there is no rush. We know you are in good hands here." After they left, Caleb helped Serena out to the porch. It was her first time outside since he had brought her here, and the fresh air felt glorious. She sat in a wooden rocking chair, and he sat on the porch railing, watching her face as she looked out over his land. "It is beautiful," she said softly. The view stretched out to distant mountains, and the sky was a blue so clear and deep it seemed impossible. "It can be," he agreed. "When it is not trying to kill you." She laughed, surprising both of them. "I suppose I should hold a grudge against New Mexico, but I cannot seem to manage it. Even when I was walking through the desert, even when I thought I was going to die, there was a strange beauty to it. The way the sun turned the sand to gold, the shape of the rocks, the endless sky." "You are a romantic," Caleb said, but his tone was admiring, not mocking. "I suppose I am. Is that so bad? Not at all. This land could use more people who see its beauty instead of just its challenges." He paused, then said carefully, "How long are you planning to stay with your sister?" "I do not know. As long as she will have me, I suppose. I need to find work eventually, make my own way." "What kind of work?" "I was a bookseller in Boston, but I doubt Red River has much need for that. I can read and write, do figures. Maybe I could teach or work as a clerk somewhere." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What if you stayed here?" Her heart stopped. "What? Stay here? At the ranch? I need help with the books, with managing supplies and correspondence, and the house could use a woman's touch. I would pay you a fair wage, and you would have your own room, complete respectability." He was speaking quickly now, the words tumbling out. "I know it is not proper for an unmarried woman to live on a ranch with an unmarried man, but Thomas is here most days, and Maria comes by regularly, so there would be chaperones. And you would be free to leave whenever you wanted, no obligations." "Caleb," she said softly, and he stopped his nervous rambling. "Why are you asking me this?" He met her eyes, and the honesty in his gaze took her breath away. "Because in 3 days, you have become important to me. Because the thought of you leaving makes this place feel empty again. Because I want more time to know you, to see if this feeling I have is real or just the result of unusual circumstances." "What feeling?" she whispered, though she thought she knew. "Like I have been waiting for you. Like finding you in that desert was not just chance, but fate." He laughed self-consciously. "I know how that sounds. 3 days is not enough time to feel this way about someone, but I do." Serena stood, her legs still a little shaky and crossed to him. She put her hand on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. "I feel it too," she admitted. "I thought maybe it was just gratitude or the bond that forms between someone who saves a life and someone whose life was saved. But it is more than that. When I think about leaving here, about not seeing you every day, it feels wrong." His hand came up to cover hers. "Then stay. Stay and let us see where this goes. What about propriety? What about my reputation?" "I will make sure your reputation is protected. We will do everything properly, and if anyone in town has anything to say about it, they can answer to me." His jaw set in a stubborn line that made her smile. "You would fight for my honor. I would do whatever it takes to keep you here, to keep you safe and happy." She looked up at him, this man who had appeared like an angel in her darkest moment, and made her decision. "All right, I will stay. At least for a while, to see if this is real." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, careful of her still healing body, and held her close. She rested her head against his chest and listened to the strong, steady beat of his heart, and felt something inside her that had been broken in Boston begin to heal. The arrangement worked better than either of them could have hoped. Serena proved to be organized and efficient with the ranch books, catching several accounting errors that had been costing Caleb money. She also took over the cooking, which had previously been a haphazard affair of whatever Caleb could throw together after a long day's work. Thomas declared her biscuits the best he had ever tasted, and even Caleb, who was not given to excessive praise, admitted that coming home to a real meal was one of life's great pleasures. But more than the practical arrangements, it was the small moments of connection that drew them closer. The way Caleb would find excuses to come to the house during the day, ostensibly for water or supplies, but really just to see her smile. The way Serena would watch from the porch as he worked with the horses, admiring the strength and grace in his movements. The evenings they spent sitting together after dinner, talking about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to funny stories about their childhoods. One evening, about 2 weeks after she had started staying at the ranch, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Caleb was teaching her to identify the constellations that would soon appear. "There," he said, pointing. "That is Cassiopeia. And over there, that bright one, that is Venus. Not a star at all, but a planet." "How do you know all this?" she asked. "My brother taught me. Daniel loved the stars. He used to say they reminded him that there was more to the world than just our small corner of it." His voice was wistful but not pained. Talking about Daniel was getting easier. "He sounds like he was a wonderful person." "He was. He would have liked you. He always said I needed someone who could match my stubborn streak with their own." He glanced at her with a smile. "And you are possibly the most stubborn person I have ever met, walking for days through a desert rather than giving up." "I am not stubborn. I am determined. There is a difference." "Of course there is," he said, laughing. Then his expression grew serious. "Serena, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to race. "What is it?" "These past 2 weeks have been the happiest of my life. I wake up looking forward to the day because I know I will see you. I work harder because I want to build something worth having. And at night, when we sit out here talking, I feel more content than I ever have." He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "I know it is fast. I know people will say we have not known each other long enough, but I need you to know that my feelings for you are real. This is not gratitude or circumstance. This is me falling in love with you." Serena felt tears prick her eyes. "Caleb, you do not have to say anything back," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I needed you to understand that when I asked you to stay, it was not just about having help with the ranch. It was about wanting you in my life." "I love you too," she said, the words spilling out. "I think I started falling for you the moment you carried me to safety, the way you were so gentle and careful with me. And every day since then, I have fallen a little more. The way you laugh at my terrible jokes, the way you listen when I talk about books like they matter, the way you treat everyone with respect regardless of their station. I love you, Caleb Quinn." He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes searching hers. "Can I kiss you?" "I wish you would," she breathed. The kiss was gentle, reverent, a promise more than a passion. His lips were soft against hers, and she felt the kiss all the way down to her toes. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. She laughed, the sound bright with joy. "Is that a question or a command?" "Both, neither, I do not care, just say yes. We have known each other less than a month, I know, and if you want to wait, we will wait. But I know what I want, and I want you. I want to wake up next to you for the rest of my life. I want to build this ranch with you, to make a home and a family with you. I want everything, Serena." She thought about Boston, about the careful, proper courtship she had gone through with her former fiancé. They had known each other for 2 years before he proposed, and it had ended in betrayal and heartbreak. Time was not a guarantee of anything, but the way Caleb looked at her, the way her heart felt when she was near him, that felt like certainty. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." His shout of joy startled the horses in the corral. He swept her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, deeper this time, with a passion that made her knees weak. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Red River, with Martha and James as witnesses and half the town in attendance. Serena wore a simple white dress that Martha had helped her sew, and Caleb wore a new suit that Thomas had helped him pick out in Santa Fe. She had never seen him look so handsome or so nervous. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Caleb kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the audience sniffled into their handkerchiefs. The celebration afterward was held at Martha and James's farm, with tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by neighbors who were delighted by the romance of it all. The story of how Caleb had found Serena half dead in the desert, and how they had fallen in love, had spread through the territory, taking on the quality of legend. "You are a lucky man, Quinn," one of the ranchers said, clapping Caleb on the shoulder. "Finding a woman like that in the desert. That is divine intervention if I have ever seen it." "I know," Caleb said, his eyes never leaving Serena where she stood talking with a group of women. "Believe me, I know." That night they returned to the ranch as husband and wife. Caleb carried her over the threshold despite her laughing protests that it was unnecessary, and set her down gently in the main room of what was now their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn," he said. "It feels strange hearing that name," she admitted. "Good strange, but strange nonetheless." "You will get used to it." He pulled her close, his arms around her waist. "I still cannot quite believe you are really mine, that you are here to stay." "Where else would I be?" She looped her arms around his neck. "You saved my life, Caleb, and then you gave me a reason to be grateful for it." He kissed her, slow and deep, and she melted against him. The passion that had been carefully restrained during their courtship finally had permission to bloom, and it was like a wildfire catching light. He lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bedroom, to the bed where he had first laid her down when she was near death. Now she was vibrantly, gloriously alive, and she was his. The months that followed were the happiest either of them had ever known. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Serena's careful management of the finances allowed them to buy more cattle and even hire an additional hand. Caleb expanded the house, adding a proper parlor and a second bedroom, joking that they needed to plan for the future. That future arrived sooner than expected. By spring, Serena realized she was pregnant. She told Caleb one evening as they sat on the porch, the familiar ritual that had become the foundation of their relationship. "I have news," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. He looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened. "Are you certain?" Maria confirmed it yesterday. "We are going to have a baby." The expression on his face was one of pure wonder. "A baby? Serena, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" "Happy." "I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once." He pulled her close, his hand still resting protectively over where their child grew. "You have given me everything I never knew I wanted." The pregnancy was not easy. The New Mexico summer was brutal, and Serena's body struggled with the heat. But Caleb was unfailingly attentive, making sure she stayed cool and hydrated, taking on extra work around the house so she could rest. Martha came often to help, and the two sisters grew even closer than they had been as children. In October, when the heat had finally broken and the air carried the first hint of autumn, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Caleb, pacing outside the bedroom door while Maria and Martha attended to Serena, thought he might go mad with worry. But when he finally heard the baby's cry, thin and furious, he nearly wept with relief. Martha opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "Come meet your son." Serena was propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, with a tiny bundle in her arms. She looked up as Caleb entered, and her smile was brilliant. "Come see him," she said softly. "Come see our boy." Caleb approached carefully, as if the moment were made of glass. When he looked down at the baby, at the tiny red face and the shock of dark hair, something in his chest cracked open. This was his son, his child, a piece of him and Serena made real. "He is perfect," he whispered. "What should we name him?" Serena asked. Caleb thought for a long moment, then said, "Daniel, if that is all right with you, Daniel James, after my brother and your brother-in-law." Tears filled Serena's eyes. "That is perfect." Little Daniel grew strong and healthy, filling the house with noise and chaos and joy. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn determination. By his first birthday, he was toddling around the ranch, getting into everything, and both Caleb and Serena agreed that one child was definitely not enough. They wanted Daniel to have siblings, to grow up surrounded by family the way neither of them had. Their daughter arrived 2 years later, a calm baby with blonde hair and a sweet disposition that was the complete opposite of her rambunctious brother. They named her Sarah Rose, and from the moment Daniel saw her, he appointed himself her protector. Watching her son gently hold his sister's tiny hand, Serena felt her heart might burst from happiness. The ranch continued to grow. With Thomas's help and the additional hands they hired, they expanded to over 500 acres. The cattle herd increased, and they began breeding horses as well, a venture that proved surprisingly profitable. Caleb's reputation for honesty and hard work spread, and the Quinn Ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where a man's word was his bond. But success never changed them. They remained the same people they had been, valuing hard work and family above all else. Every evening, weather permitting, they still sat on the porch together after the children were in bed, talking about their day and their dreams. It was their ritual, the foundation that everything else was built on. One evening, about 5 years after their marriage, Serena sat in her rocking chair watching the sunset while Caleb worked on repairing a harness. Inside, they could hear the children playing before bedtime, Daniel's voice explaining some elaborate game to Sarah. "You ever think about that day?" she asked quietly. "The day you found me." Caleb looked up from his work. "All the time. How could I not? It changed everything. I was so certain I was going to die. I had accepted it, made peace with it." She shook her head. "And then you appeared like something out of a dream. Sometimes I still cannot believe it was real. It was real. The luckiest day of my life finding you." He set aside the harness and moved to sit on the porch railing in front of her, taking her hands. "Do you have any regrets about how fast everything happened, about giving up your plans to live with your sister?" "Not a single one." "Well, maybe one small one." His face fell. "What is it?" "I regret that I ever doubted this, that I thought we were moving too fast, that I worried about what people would think. I should have trusted what my heart was telling me from the first moment." She squeezed his hands. "You were right. Finding each other was not chance. It was fate." He leaned forward and kissed her, a soft press of lips that still made her heart race even after 5 years. "I love you, Serena Quinn. And I love you, Caleb Quinn, my rescuer, my husband, my home." The years continued to pass in a blur of happiness and hard work. Their family grew to include another son, Christopher, and then one more daughter, little Catherine, who had her father's dark eyes and an adventurous spirit that constantly gave her parents heart attacks. The house expanded again to accommodate everyone, and what had started as a simple adobe ranch house became a sprawling family home filled with laughter and love. Daniel grew into a serious young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Sarah inherited her mother's love of books and learning, and declared at age 10 that she intended to be a teacher. Christopher was the charmer of the family, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile. And Catherine, the baby, was fearless and stubborn, qualities that both amused and terrified her parents in equal measure. Caleb and Serena watched their children grow with pride and wonder. On quiet evenings, after everyone else was in bed, they would sometimes talk about how different their lives might have been if that stagecoach had not crashed, if Caleb had not been checking fence lines that particular day, if any of 100 small decisions had gone differently. "I do not like to think about it," Serena said one night, cuddled against Caleb's side on the porch swing he had built for her. "All the ways we might never have met. We would have found each other somehow," Caleb said with certainty. "Maybe not in the same way, maybe not at the same time, but we would have found each other. Some things are meant to be." "You really believe that?" "I have to. The alternative is thinking that everything we have built together, was just random chance. And that does not feel true. Finding you was the most important thing I have ever done. My purpose." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "Even after all these years, even after 4 children and countless challenges, and the inevitable difficulties of building a life together." Her heart still skipped when he looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Caleb surprised her with a gift. He led her out past the barn to a spot on a small hill that overlooked the ranch. There, he had planted a garden. Not a vegetable garden for practical purposes, but a flower garden, full of wildflowers native to New Mexico and roses he had ordered special from a catalog. "I know you have always missed having flowers around," he said, as she stared in wonder. And I know this land can seem harsh and unforgiving. But there is beauty here too. It just takes more work to cultivate. Serena walked through the garden, touching the petals of blooming columbine and Indian paintbrush. In the center, he had placed a bench. "This is where I first saw you," he said quietly, "from this hill." I was riding fence line and I looked out and I saw what I thought was a rock. Then I saw the buzzards and I knew it was something else, something that needed help. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "You remember the exact spot." "I remember everything about that day. How the sun was angled, how hot it was, the fear I felt when I realized you were a person and not an animal, the way you looked up at me like I was salvation itself. I remember all of it." She crossed to him and wrapped her arms around him, holding him tight. "Thank you for finding me, for loving me, for building this life with me. Thank you for staying, for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not have much to offer except hard work and a stubborn heart. That was all I needed. That is still all I need." They sat on the bench together, looking out over the ranch they had built, the home they had created, and felt the profound satisfaction of a life well lived. As the children grew older and began to find their own paths, Caleb and Serena remained each other's center. Daniel eventually married a girl from town and built his own house on the far corner of the ranch, taking over more and more of the daily operations. Sarah did indeed become a teacher, opening a school in Red River and boarding with Martha and James during the week. Christopher announced his intention to study law in Santa Fe, wanting to fight for justice in the courtrooms rather than on horseback. And Catherine, true to form, declared that she was going to travel the world and have adventures. Through it all, Caleb and Serena faced life's challenges together. There were hard years when the cattle prices dropped, and they worried about money. There were droughts that tested their resilience and winters that were brutally cold. There was the grief of losing Martha to influenza, a loss that devastated Serena, but that she weathered with Caleb's steady support. There was the pride of watching their children succeed and the bittersweet ache of watching them leave home. But through everything, they had each other. Every evening they still sat on the porch together, the ritual unchanged after decades. They held hands and talked and watched the sun set over the land they loved. Sometimes they were silent, comfortable enough with each other that words were not always necessary. Other times they talked for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had when they first met, on their 25th wedding anniversary. Surrounded by their children and grandchildren, Caleb stood and raised his glass. 25 years ago, I found a woman dying in the desert. I carried her to shade and gave her water, and I thought that was the end of it. A good deed done, a life saved. I had no idea that I had found my future, my purpose, the other half of my soul." He looked at Serena, his eyes bright with emotion. "You have made every day of these 25 years an adventure and a joy. You have given me children I am proud of, a home that feels like heaven, and a love that has never wavered. I would walk through that desert 1,000 times if it meant finding you again." Serena stood and joined him, her hand in his. "And I would walk for days without water or rest if I knew you would be there at the end, waiting to carry me to safety. You are my rescuer, my partner, my love. Here is to 25 more years." They kissed while their family cheered, and in that moment, they were not grandparents or successful ranchers or pillars of the community. They were simply Caleb and Serena, two people who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful together. The years continued their inevitable march. Caleb's dark hair turned silver, and Serena's face gained lines that spoke of a life filled with laughter. They slowed down, handing over more of the ranch work to Daniel and his sons. They spent their days in the garden Caleb had built, in the house they had filled with memories, surrounded by the family they had created. On a summer evening 50 years after the day they met, they sat on their porch as the sun painted the sky in familiar shades of gold and orange. Caleb held Serena's hand, his grip not as strong as it once was but no less loving. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" he asked. "After I gave you water, I said thank you," Serena replied, her voice still clear despite her age. "You said more than that. You told me your name. Serena Caldwell, and I told you that you were safe." "I was safe. I have been safe every day since because of you." "No," he said gently. "We kept each other safe. We built something safe together." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the sunset together, as they had done thousands of times before. The ranch spread out before them, alive with the sound of their grandchildren playing, the evidence of the life they had built visible in every direction. "It was a good life," Serena said softly. "The best," Caleb agreed. "The very best." And as the sun slipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, Caleb pointed out Cassiopeia and Venus, teaching his great-grandson the same lessons he had once taught his own children, the same lessons his brother Daniel had taught him so long ago. The cycle continued, generation after generation, built on the foundation of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and had chosen to build something lasting. Serena watched her husband with their great-grandson and felt a profound sense of peace. She had walked for days through the desert without water or rest, prepared to die alone. Instead, she had found love, family, purpose, and home. The cowboy had found her and carried her to shade, but what he had really done was carry her to a new life, a better life, a life filled with more joy than she could have ever imagined possible. It was, she thought as Caleb's hand found hers again in the growing darkness, the greatest rescue of all.